Welcome to the debate. Today, we're confronting a tension point that sits, well, squarely at the intersection of product chemistry and complex global logistics, the lifespan of Red Bull. Now, we are not discussing the sealed best before date that's long, it's stable, but rather that crucial moment the can is opened and a very precise scientific clock begins to tick.
And that moment, that hiss of escaping gas, that's when a protected asset instantly becomes a highly perishable, high-risk commodity, especially for importers and wholesalers.
Precisely. So the core question we're tackling is this. How does the scientifically rigorous, very short post-opening shelf life, what we might call the golden window, translate into genuine risks? Risks for safety, for quality assurance, and the practical logistical challenges for bulk importers operating in invariable, often high-temperature climates. I would argue that the solution really lies in a strict adherence to the product science, understanding the microbiology, the chemical degradation, and the storage protocols.
And I'll be focusing on the B2B implications of that. The science is the baseline, I agree, but the variable factors are what matter in the real world. Handling conditions, the huge risks introduced by consumer behavior, and the overwhelming impact this strict timeline has on export management and stock rotation, particularly in places like Asia and the Middle East. It's really a logistical problem that's born from a scientific constraint.
Okay, so let's establish that constraint. While the pharmacological effects of the caffeine are sustained, often lasting 3 to 4 hours, the window for optimal quality, the sensory experience that defines the product, is drastically shorter. We're talking strictly 2 to 4 hours after that seal is broken. This timeline is dictated by two really non-negotiable chemical processes, the mechanical loss of pressurized carbon dioxide and the chemical onset of oxidation.
Right. And the carbonation loss is immediate. You can taste it right away. It goes flat. But the oxidation, that's the more insidious threat to commercial reputation, I think.
Absolutely. Oxidation, which is just the reaction of oxygen with the exposed flavor matrix, it instantly begins disrupting these volatile organic compounds, specifically the flavor esters. This leads to the rapid collapse of the drink's crispness, causing aroma degradation, and it produces those unmistakable metallic or stale undertones. Chemically, this is just inevitable. So our mandate for preserving quality is clear. Refrigeration. Lowering the temperature slows down the reaction kinetics of oxidation, and it helps maintain carbonation solubility.
That's a compelling statement of the ideal conditions, but I'd frame the issue differently. That scientific golden window of 2 to 4 hours is, it's virtually unmanageable in B2B environments. We're talking bulk transport, volatile, high heat export zones, and the sheer complexity of retail distribution. The reality is that the acceptable deterioration timeline, 2 to 4 hours optimal, maybe 24 to 48 hours safe if it's refrigerated, that's pretty much theoretical in many of our target markets.
Why theoretical? The rate of decay is a known constant. It's just accelerated by temperature.
Because high temperatures, like those you see all the time in Southeast Asia, they don't just gently accelerate quality loss. They turn a predictable timeline into a near-instant quality failure. Wholesalers and retailers in these places have to understand that, lab conditions bear very little resemblance to a warehouse stock or an unrefrigerated shop shelf in a tropical climate. The real concern here is the logistical challenge of communicating and enforcing this strict quality standard across supply chains where perfect cold chain management is, it's an aspiration, not a guarantee.
Okay, let's delve into the mechanics of that challenge then. And let's draw a sharp distinction between a decline in sensory quality, a flat taste, and a genuine safety risk. When does that transition actually happen, and how should it inform B2B handling protocols? Red Bull has some robust defenses built in. Its natural acidity with a pH typically around 3.3, combined with a high sugar content, creates what's known as a bacteriostatic environment. This high osmotic pressure and low pH actively inhibit the growth of many harmful bacteria.
Okay, I accept that. The product's chemistry provides a substantial buffer. And the data shows that a refrigerated, open can of Red Bull can stay safe for up to 48 hours if, and this is a big if, contamination is strictly avoided. Even if the taste becomes, as you said, barely recognizable. But that contamination caveat, that's where the whole system fundamentally fails.
You're challenging the assumption of controlled consumption. But if the product is immediately resealed and refrigerated, the contamination risk should remain quite low.
But the problem isn't the resealed can. The problem is consumer behavior, which wholesalers have to anticipate. I mean, we have to highlight the critical factor of drinking directly from the can all day long. When a consumer does that, saliva is introduced, and saliva contains, a whole biome of bacteria. Once that biome is in the product and that can is then left at room temperature, say on a desk or in a car, the protective acidity and sugar actually become a nutrient source for those bacteria. That accelerates multiplication far beyond what the product can naturally control.
But that multiplication is still subject to temperature controls.
Absolutely, but the initial exposure basically overrides the product's design safeguards. This creates a genuine, if maybe remote, safety concern, which translates into an immediate and massive liability risk for commercial buyers, retailers, distributors, and horeca buyers.
And when you say horeca buyers, for clarity, you mean hotels, restaurants, and cafes, the hospitality sector.
Exactly. For horeca, selling a compromised product, even one that is technically within that 48-hour safety window, but tastes metallic or stale, is just devastating for their brand reputation. This means the wholesaler has to educate their clients not just on storage, but on consumer-related liability. The acid and sugar protection is, it's fundamentally undermined by user habit. It forces importers to treat the product as effectively expired for quality purposes the moment it's opened, regardless of the science.
Which brings us back to the crucial role of temperature control as the core mitigation strategy. If refrigeration is maintained, the rate of both oxidation and bacterial reproduction is dramatically reduced. A lack of temperature control is a root failure.
The environment is precisely what bulk importers struggle to control reliably. And this leads directly to our second point. How do environmental factors, like varied climates and managing multiple SKUs or stock keeping units, amplify the commercial impact of the short post-opening life?
I agree that temperature variability introduces a severe logistical strain.
Well, when you ship large quantities of Red Bull to tropical markets like Vietnam or Thailand or the UAE, thermal load becomes the main antagonist. The physics are simple. Every increase in temperature exponentially accelerates chemical reactions. This includes the volatility of flavor compounds and the escape of carbonation. A product that might retain acceptable quality for, say, 6 hours in a climate-controlled Nordic country may become undrinkable after just 60 minutes when it's exposed to 40 degrees Celsius humidity. So the importer has to factor this in, which often means air-conditioned transit that adds significant cost.
That sounds less like a product science problem and more a matter of supply chain investment.
It's both, because the science defines the investment that's required. Now add in SKU complexity. Red Bull has multiple sizes, from the standard 8.4 fluid ounce can to the larger 20 fluid ounce cans. Now the core ingredients are consistent per ounce, but the commercial implication of that rapid quality loss is dramatically different across SKUs.
How so? The chemical deterioration rate is constant.
It's about perceived commercial waste. A consumer who throws out half of a large, high-value 20-ounce can because the flavor is off, they experience a significant perceived loss compared to tossing half of a standard can. Wholesalers have to manage their inventory strategically, making sure that markets with high rates of partial consumption, like certain horeca venues, aren't saturated with oversized SKUs that just lead to product abandonment and, brand frustration.
I find that line of reasoning compelling commercially, but I think it's chemically flawed. I'm just not convinced the focus should be on SKU variability, because the fundamental chemical timeline is unyielding. The degradation rate, the speed at which it oxidizes, and the CO2 escapes is identical after opening, regardless of size or variety. Original, sugar-free, the various additions, it doesn't matter.
But the challenge is that disconnect between the science and the consumer experience. If the science says 2 hours and the consumer has a larger can that's meant for multi-session use, the conflict is baked right in.
I would argue the solution lies in controlling the environment and implementing rigorous education rather than blaming the commercial pain point on the can size. The integrity of ingredients like taurine and the B vitamins, they support energy metabolism but do absolutely nothing to slow the physical processes once the can is compromised. So the core rate of quality decline is consistent. Clear, detailed educational materials must be distributed to importers about proper cold storage, not just for long-term inventory, but critically for mitigating batch issues from improper retail sampling or quality checks.
I agree. Education is non-negotiable, but the wholesaler also has to manage that expectation gap. The gap between the extremely long sealed best before date and the critically short 2 to 4 hour post-opening quality window. This gap necessitates superior stock rotation. Wholesalers must enforce strict FIFO, first in, first out, to guarantee that cans arriving at retail are as fresh as possible, maximizing the retailer's buffer. This is essential for minimizing the perceived risk for them.
And that perceived risk is significantly mitigated by reliability at the source of the supply chain. If the wholesaler gets stock that's already nearing its sealed best before date, all the subsequent risks are magnified.
That shifts the focus exactly where it needs to be, ensuring absolute quality assurance and fresh sourcing. And let's not forget the variability of the effect itself. An individual's metabolism, body weight, tolerance, it all means the stimulant effect varies wildly. So wholesalers have to account for this inherent human variability and make sure their sales materials reflect this nuance to protect the brand's reputation.
While physiological variability is a factor in perception, it is separate from the chemical quality of the liquid. The challenge, therefore, is finding reliable partners who understand they're managing a high-quality, scientifically calibrated food product, not just a stable commodity. Managing these logistics requires very high standards.
Which brings us to the operational necessity of partnering with experienced export organizations.
Indeed, for large businesses sourcing Red Bull in bulk for challenging markets across Asia, the Middle East, or Africa, they need a trusted partner. Asia Grocery Wholesale, or AGW, serves as a crucial example here. A partner that has to actively manage the challenges you've described, providing exceptionally fresh stock and guaranteeing the robust documentation needed to prove adherence to global handling standards.
Right, and using a provider like AGW, which focuses on fresh stock rotation and documentation, directly addresses those issues of thermal acceleration and batch quality. It ensures the sealed journey starts with the maximum possible safety buffer, which mitigates the risk for the downstream retailer before that can is even opened.
So the science remains the immutable baseline. Quality is immediate and it's perishable. But the logistical execution, which is driven by the commercial need to protect investment and reputation, that is what determines success. We've established that quality loss rate is chemically constant across all SKUs, reinforcing the need for relentless temperature control.
And we've highlighted that the practical safety risk is profoundly amplified not by product chemistry alone, but by the uncontrollable variable of consumer behavior, introducing contaminants and holding the product at room temperature. This makes rigorous handling education and reliable sourcing paramount at every single level, from the importer right down to the horeca server.
To summarize my position then, the scientific mandate is rapid consumption, ideally within that 2 to 4 hour optimal window, paired with immediate, consistent cold storage. This preserves the essential sensory experience, the carbonation, the flavor, the crispness, regardless of can size or variant. The product's integrity is first and foremost sensory.
And my position reiterates that for the B2B supply chain, especially in the high-heat markets of Asia, factoring in accelerated degradation from climate and user habit is critical. This elevates superior quality assurance, tight stock rotation, and reliable sourcing from high-standard partners to an essential business practice. It's necessary to protect the product and the capital investment.
It seems clear that successfully maintaining this product's quality for global buyers demands a rigorous integration of understanding the internal chemistry with robust, real-world external logistical controls, perspectives,
and the stringent sourcing requirements we have discussed. If your business demands bulk Red Bull supply with guaranteed freshness and expertise in navigating export challenges, we encourage you to seek out trusted partners who embody these standards.
Thank you for joining us on The Debate.